news is you understand what you're supposed to do. You've been trained, you have the knowledge, but for whatever reason you decided that you didn't need to follow the rules and you caused an accident. We don't want to find ourselves in either one of those categories. That's why we're here today. So let's move on with class. Okay, let's talk about the 3 rules for safe gun handling. These 3 rules apply every single time we pick up a firearm. The first one is we always keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction. A safe direction means that if that firearm was to discharge, it would not destroy anything that we didn't intend to destroy. We always keep our finger off the trigger until we're ready to shoot. That means we stay off the trigger till we're actually on target, and we come off the trigger again before we come off target. The last one is we always keep our firearm unloaded until we're ready to use it. What this means is that if we are going to transport our firearm, clean our firearm, or store our firearm, we keep it unloaded until we're actually at the range and ready to use it. Let's talk about the rules for using and storing a gun. The first one is know your target and what is beyond. You have to be aware that the shots that you fire may miss your target, or they may pass through your target and cause injury or damage to persons and property beyond that. The second one is be sure your firearm is safe to operate. What this means is maintain it, look after it, carry out all the maintenance recommended in your owner's manual. The third rule is know how to use your firearm safely. Get trained. Time spent on the range practicing will vastly improve your firearm skills. The fourth rule is use only the correct ammunition for your firearm. Trust me, only bad things happen if you put the wrong ammunition in your gun. The fifth rule is always wear eye and ear protection. The sixth rule is never use alcohol or drugs before or while using a firearm. This doesn't just apply to illegal drugs. Many over-the-counter and prescription medications have serious side effects. You shouldn't be shooting while you're taking them. The seventh rule is store your firearm so it's not accessible to unauthorized persons. Unauthorized persons are minors, anybody who's not trained, and anybody who's prohibited by law from possessing a firearm. And finally, be aware this list is not a conclusive list of all the safety precautions. Many sports and shooting activities have additional safety precautions that you will need to follow. Let's talk about some hygiene guidelines for whenever we shoot or clean our firearm. Some of the chemicals we use are poisonous, and some of the chemicals that are discharged by our firearm when we fire it are poisonous as well. The first one is refrain from smoking, eating, drinking, or from touching your eyes or your mouth, because you can transfer some of the chemicals into your body. The second one is whenever we finish shooting or cleaning our firearm, we should immediately wash our hands and face with cold soapy water. And finally, when we get home from our fun day at the range, our clothes are covered in gunshot residue. We don't want to transfer this to our friends or family. So when you get home, change your clothing, clean it, have a shower. In this section, we're going to talk about the 2 most common defensive pistol action types. The first one is our double action revolver, and the second one is our semi-automatic pistol. So what is a revolver? A revolver is a pistol which has a rotating cylinder which has individual firing chambers contained within it. Whenever I pull the trigger, the cylinder rotates, lining up the next cartridge with the firing pin. The hammer will cock and release, firing the cartridge. Let's talk about the main parts of our double action revolver. The first part is the frame. The frame is the backbone of our revolver. All the other parts mount onto it or into it. The next part we're going to talk about is the barrel. The barrel is a hollow metal tube through which the bullet passes. Carved inside our barrel is a series of spiral grooves called rifling. As the bullet passes down the barrel, these grooves cause the bullet to spin, stabilizing it and making our firearm more accurate. The next part we're going to talk about is the action. The action is all the parts that we use to load, fire, or unload our revolver. And they're all contained within the frame. Even though it looks entirely different and functions completely differently, our semi-automatic pistol has the same 3 main components as our double-action revolver. The first one is the frame. The second one is the barrel. And you'll notice that the barrel is actually shrouded by the slide, and and we'll talk a little more about the slide later. The last part is our action. Again, our action is all the parts that we use to load, fire, and unload our semi-automatic pistol, and they're all contained within the frame. Now let's talk about how we safely load, fire, and unload our double-action revolver. For the purpose of this exercise, we're going to use inert training rounds. We don't use live ammunition in the classroom. So, remembering my 3 gun-safe handling rules, the first thing I do is I pick up my firearm, finger off the trigger, keep it pointed in a safe direction. Then, using my cylinder release latch, I open the cylinder and I check that all my chambers are indeed empty. Now I'm ready to load my firearm. First thing I'm going to do is insert my cartridges into the individual chambers. Then I simply roll the cylinder closed and ensure it's locked in place. It's called a double action revolver because every time I pull the trigger, it does 2 things. The first one is it will cock the hammer, and the second one, it will release the hammer. Okay, so now that we've finished firing our double action revolver, we have to unload it. So again, finger off the trigger, safe direction. Again, I use my cylinder release latch, roll out the cylinder, and now I'm going to use my ejector rod to eject the cartridges. Then I check all my chambers are indeed empty. My firearm is now safely unloaded. Now let's talk about our semi-automatic pistol. How do we load that, fire it, and unload it safely? Well, right off the bat, you're going to notice it doesn't have a cylinder. Instead, we have a magazine. Magazine is a hollow chamber with a spring in it and a follower on top where we store our extra ammunition ready to be fed into our chamber. The magazine fits in the magazine well, which is normally in the handle of the pistol. We also, to facilitate removing our magazine, have a magazine release button. Again, for this demonstration, we're using inert training ammunition. The first thing we have to do is to place the back of our cartridge on the front edge of our follower in the magazine, push down and slide it to the rear. Repeat until we have loaded all our cartridges into our magazine. The next thing, keeping my finger off the trigger, my firearm pointed in a safe direction, I check my chamber is empty and I check my magazine well is empty. Then, insert my magazine firmly into the magazine well, grasp the slide, pull it to the rear, and release. The slide has now picked up the first round from the magazine and put it into the chamber, and my pistol is ready to fire. When I pull the trigger, the gun fires. We take some of the energy from the cartridge and use it to blow the slide to the rear. That ejects the round that was in the chamber, resets my firing mechanism, and on the way forward picks up the next round from the magazine and puts it into the chamber. When I come to unload my firearm, to do it safely, the first thing I have to do is remove the source of the ammunition. This will be my magazine. So, by depressing my magazine release button, I can take out my magazine and remove any extra rounds. I still have to check my chamber is clear. Again, grasping my slide, pull it smartly to the rear. It will eject anything that's in the chamber. I can physically check the chamber is clear, release the slide, and check that my magazine well is clear. My firearm is now unloaded. Some semi-automatic firearms have what we call a slide lock. The slide lock can be used to lock my slide to the rear to facilitate easier checking of the chamber. In this section, we're going to talk about ammunition. So the first thing we need to learn is the 4 components that go to make up our pistol cartridge. The first one is the cartridge case, which holds everything together. The second one is our primer. The third one is our powder charge. And the final one is the bullet. So how do they work? Well, they're very simple. When we pull the trigger, our firing pin or our hammer strikes our primer. This creates a small spark. That small spark ignites our powder charge, which produces a large volume of hot expanding gas, which pushes our bullet down the barrel. Now that we understand what our cartridges are made of and how they operate, let's talk about the 2 distinctive types of cartridges that you're going to come across. The first one is a rimfire cartridge. A rimfire cartridge is called a rimfire cartridge because the primer is sprayed inside the rim of the cartridge. The second one is our centerfire cartridge. The centerfire cartridge has a cup containing the priming compound located in the head stamp of the cartridge. Let's talk about cartridge designation and identification. It's really important that we only use the correct ammunition for our firearm. All our firearms are individually chambered to take a specific type of ammunition. If we put any other type in there, it can have disastrous consequences. At best, you can destroy your firearm. At worst, you can suffer serious bodily injury. So, with that being said, how do we identify the correct ammunition for our firearm? There are several places we can look. The first one would be your owner's manual. That will always tell you what kind of ammunition you can use with your firearm. The second place we can look, on our double-action revolver, it's stamped on the barrel. With our semi-automatic pistol, it's stamped on the chamber. So we know how to identify what kind of ammunition our firearm uses. But how do we check the ammunition to make sure it's the correct ammunition? Again, there are a couple of places we can look. The first one would be on the box that you've got your ammunition in. It'll be stamped clearly on the box what it is. The next one, if we look on the head stamp of our cartridge, many cartridges have the ammunition designation stamped on the head stamp. So now we have no excuse for putting the wrong ammunition in our firearm. The last type of ammunition I'd like to discuss with you is plus P and plus P plus ammunition. This ammunition is loaded to produce a higher pressure for better ballistic performance. It's usually used as a home defense round. However, if your firearm does not have a plus P or a plus P plus rating, you should not use this ammunition as it will damage your firearm. Let's talk a little bit about our defensive ammunition. There's a couple of things we want our defensive ammunition to do. One, it has to be 100% reliable, so you're going to have to practice with different types of ammunition in your firearm to make sure they feed and function correctly. The second thing we want it to do is stop in our target. We don't want it to over-penetrate and damage somebody else or something else that's behind our target. The most commonly used defensive round is the jacketed hollow point. The jacketed hollow point is designed to expand upon entering the target and prevent over-penetration. Other types that are equally lethal are full metal jacket. Full metal jacket is a lead bullet completely encased in a copper jacket and is designed to penetrate targets and leave a nice clean circle. The third type is the wad cutter. The wad cutter is a soft lead bullet normally used in revolvers with a flat tip. Again, it makes nice holes in targets, but it's not very good for defensive ammunition. Now let's talk about the three common cartridge malfunctions. The first one is a misfire. A misfire is a complete failure of a cartridge to ignite after the primer has been struck by the firing pin. The second one is a hang fire. A hang fire is a perceptible delay in ignition of the cartridge after the primer has been struck. And the third one is a squib load. Squib load is a cartridge which does ignite when the primer is struck, however it develops less than normal pressure. So how do we deal with these malfunctions? Let's start with our misfire and our hang fire. I'm at the range. Click. What do I have? A hang fire or a misfire? The problem is we don't know. The worst case scenario would be a hang fire. So we always treat a misfire or a hang fire as a hang fire. What do? We keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, finger off the trigger, and we wait for 30 seconds. If the round has not discharged after 30 seconds, we then want to carefully unload our firearm and dispose of that cartridge safely. We know what to do with a misfire or a hang fire, but how do we know we've had a squib load? There's three easy ways to tell. The first one would be less noise. The second one would be less recoil. And the third one would be less muzzle flash. If you think you've experienced any of these symptoms, immediately stop shooting, completely unload your firearm, and ensure that the muzzle is clear, because the bullet may have lodged in the barrel.